Can cars be good investments? Well, in this video, I'm going to explore that. We've all heard about 911 GT3 RSs commanding 200k above retail price. We've all read about R34 Skyline GTRs or Lamborghini Countachs increasing in value exponentially. But in this video, I want to focus on what I would call affordable cars. Cars that the majority of us, many of us, could buy and own. Examples being my Mark 1 MX-5, bought only a few years ago for less than £1,000. Today, you struggle to get into a Mark 1 for less than £3,000. Well, the Clio 182, again, a few years ago, they were all around £1,000, £1,500, and again, you probably need 3 to 4k to bag yourself a 182. So this video, I'm going to look at, are these true investments? Have I actually made money on these cars? And if I have, what I want to do is tell you what I think the next cars will be. How do you go about finding the next appreciating modern classic? Welcome to this week's Fast and Fun. The car market also, it ebbs and flows. And phases, it's an increasing market where prices are strong, you get growth in some cars, and it suddenly becomes very much a seller's market where you can command really strong, good money for your cars. And then in other phases, it flip-flops and it very much becomes a buyer's market where prices are dropping and buyers can really get some great deals. And what we've seen over the last 15 to 20 years is historically really low interest rates. And those low interest rates have done two things predominantly. One is they've made saving really, really difficult. If you've got capital, putting it away in bank accounts or savings accounts, when you plot that against just general annual inflation, in most cases you are losing money. So there's no incentive to squirrel money away. And conversely, if you wanted to borrow money, whether that's through private loan or whether some form of leasing of a car and financing of a car, it became very affordable, very cheap. And that's fueled the market for many, many years. And then the icing on the cake was the COVID bubble that really pushed prices to really, really high values. And what we've seen over the last 18 months, 2 years, is a correction in the market where it's swung now and going from a seller's very much into a buyer's market. Prices have dropped from them high peaks and they've become, well, just more affordable for more people. So let's look at some of the outgoings then associated with running a car and seeing if you can actually make the value or maybe increase, but are you actually making real money? Running costs. Again, let's use the Mark 1. It's a really good example. I've owned it for 5 years. What about servicing and repairs? That's a really good example because all cars need to be serviced. All cars need to have consumables replaced, whether it's tyres, whether it's brakes, whether it's suspension components. Older cars like this, that have reached the J curve in the depreciation curve, will also suffer from failures and problems, and some of them will not be small. So the question then is, what do you do? Do you take your car to be serviced and repaired at a third party, a specialist, a dealer, a local garage where you can get written confirmation? Price will be much more expensive, or you may decide you'll do it yourself. But if you do it yourself, it's really important that you document and you provide written receipts for all the materials that you've consumed in that time to build up the history, to give provenance to the history of the car. I look at this, in its 5 years, it's had 2 services. I service it every second year because of the low mileage. Insurance is quite affordable for this, but I've also got to tax the car as well. Now, I do a little trick with my cars because I've got a few cars. I tax them on a monthly basis depending on which cars I'm going to use that particular month. The rest of the time they're SORN, they're statutory off the road notification, which means road tax becomes that little bit more affordable. But over for 5 years, including one major issue that I had with the car, which ended up being a fuel pump, and all the investigation around that intermittent fault that I had, that was over £700. All the tyres, all the brakes that I've done, the 2 services, it's about £1,500 I've spent on this particular car. You then think that I have not done some jobs. The fuel gauge doesn't work on the car. That's a problem that I've had now for a couple of years. It's clean underneath, but I could have rust and corrosion issues that would need significant investment. And potentially the paintwork is not the best. It doesn't look as bad on camera, but in real world, each panel is a subtly different shade of red. So again, an overarching respray of the car is what's needed, but it's not yet worth the investment in to do that. So what I'm saying is, yes, the car in real terms may have gone up, but after you've taken into consideration servicing, repairs, insurance, road tax, and also the other thing that I've not mentioned is if you have borrowed money to buy a car, the borrowing charges, the interest that you're paying to buy the car, all those need to be taken into consideration. So what I think I've got is I've owned this for 5 years. If I look at insurance, if I look at road tax as well, plus about £1,500 on servicing and repairs, I'm probably just about breaking even at best. So it's not easy to actually, in real terms, in ownership terms, make money. And that's why I always come back to the fact that the car that you buy, if you buy well and it does appreciate in its value, that may offset the running costs. Some of, all of, or part of the running costs. And it just means it becomes more affordable owning these cars. How do you know? How can you predict? What are some of the things that you need to do to actually help you find one of the best appreciating cars? Well, as an individual car, mileage, condition and history are really, really important. If you get some super low mileage cars, the price will go up exponentially. Condition is king as well for the cars. People that are paying a premium for an older car, they want the car. There's an expectation that the car has had the work done and it is in good condition. And history. The history, the folder that backs up what has happened to this car in its lifetime. From servicing to repairs to MOT history to the whole log of everything that has been done to this particular car. It builds up the history, and that is part of what you are buying. Tips for looking at some of the best cars to invest in. Limited editions. Cars with limited numbers. Really good examples are Evo 6s. Evo 6s, generally 20-ish thousand will get you an Evo 6. Get one that's a Tommy Mackinnon edition, you can at least double that value. Look at Archer's car, the Golf Mark V GTI that I featured a couple of weeks ago. Perfect example that because his is an edition 30, not particularly low in numbers either, that edition 30 commands roughly double what a standard Mark V GTI is. And then numbers. So it's not a limited edition, but the number of cars available. And this is purely around the supply and demand curve. And there's an easy way of checking this. And that is to go on the internet, search for how many are left, or how many cars are left. And there's a good web page there that will show you quarter by quarter through the history of the car, when that make and model came out, and how many today are left, and how they've depreciated. Interestingly, and a good tip, is it shows you the cars that are taxed and it shows you the cars that are sawn. So in other words, have been put off the road by the owners. As that number of sawned increases and the number of taxed cars on the road decreases, if they get to a point that they cross, that is a really good indication that these cars are now being bought not to be used, but to be collected, to be stored, to be used as weekend toys rather than used as everyday cars. That is a sound indication that there's strength in that particular make and model. Other factors are the first or last of a generation. Really good example there, I think, is the Lotus Elise. The original, round headlight, Series 1 Elise. For me, that is another bona fide and I think potentially undervalued car. Mid-teens will bag you a Series 1 Elise. It was the first, it was the original, it was the lightest, and for me, it was the best. So the first or last of a generation. The other thing with cars to be collected, to be invested in, to have strong resale values, is people do not want heavily modified cars. In fact, the purists will always want unmodified, standard, as it left the factory many, many years ago. And for some cars that have tended to have a history of heavy modifications, that only adds an even more significant factor. And a really good example is my Impreza WRX STI. A market swarmed full of modified and, in places, heavily modified cars. If you can hunt out an unmodified example, whether it be WRX or STI, they are a surefire investment in the long term. Size. Size both in terms of the physical size of the car and also the engine. Cars are becoming bigger and larger. Every generation tends to be bigger, heavier, and with it, less interaction, less analogue feeling. So if you can get something that is different, stays back to its purest, small, lightweight, cars like the 106 GTI or the Saxo VTS, maybe the original Phase 1 Clio 172, these were true, genuine, lightweight, fun cars. But also engines. Where cars have got bigger, engines have got smaller. Because of EU emissions, the big capacity NA engines have become smaller and largely turbocharged. Look at the wonderful AMG C63, E63, 6.2 litre V8, the hand-built Mercedes engine, one of the all-time greats. How that evolved from the 6.2 normally aspirated V8 all the way down to the 4 litre V8 and then eventually into a 4-pot. So again, seeking out those large capacity, normally aspirated engines as another surefire future classic. Gearboxes, that's another one. The transition has been alarmingly quick over the last, 10 years really, that we've moved from manual into automation, to, in places, paddle shift changing or full automatic. But it's been an alarming change. And I just think by having that, losing out to that manual interaction with a third pedal for the clutch, it loses out on something. So I think the most valuable in the future will be the manual type of cars. And then, as we transition on the journey to electrification through EVs, whether or not that is the end solution or not, whether hydrogen, synthetic fuels, or most likely a combination of many other technologies, there is something around noise, something distinctive, something that will bark, something that will give a noise. A part of that driving experience is what you hear. And whether that be a wonderful V12 like I experienced in the DB9, or whether it's that flat four burble of my Subaru, or many other cars that have distinctive noises to them. That again, cars that give you that audible noise, for me, again, will be cars that will be sought after. And there we go. That is my tips of the cars, the types of cars that you should be looking out for. And I think the final point is for me to say what I have done. Every car that I have purchased, I've not purchased it because of future resale values. I've purchased it because I think they'll remain strong. I think they will maybe offset some of the running costs. But the most important reason I've bought them is for the love of driving, for the love of owning one of these cars. Why else would I have just bought a Range Rover L322? They're one of the most depreciating cars on the road. There we go. I hope I've given you a little insight into some of the things that I look for when I'm looking at buying my next fast and fun performance and sports car. I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you have, as always, please thumbs up, subscribe, stay tuned. Another video next week. Thanks for watching.